That really just means your rents are too low. If you're 100% for an extended period of time, it's because you're not raising rents, which means people are being incentivized to stay in the units longer than they normally would.
Welcome into the Get Invested podcast, a podcast about all things real estate and real estate investing, brought to you by Capital Velocity Investments and a part of the Matthias Talks Investing Substack.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Get Invested podcast with your host, Jordan and Matthias. As always, we're excited to be here and excited to talk all things investing, real estate, and real estate investing. Today, we're going to talk about a major metric, I guess you could say, of the business plan, occupancy. But before we jump into that, Matthias, what's up? How's it been? How's it going? What's going on with you?
Pretty good. Keeping busy over here. Last night had a big playoff baseball game. And
yeah, I appreciated the text to give me the immediate update.
It was there was some dad high-fiving going on there.
Heck yeah.
It was intense. Coming to bottom of it's not really ninth, but basically the bottom of the last inning they're going to play. 2 outs, bases loaded, and kid hit a liner to the right center gap to walk off the team, which was pretty awesome. The kids went nuts, and so did most of the parents. It was a good game, really fun game, and I was like, man, I'm as amped as I would be at a Chiefs game or watching a Chiefs game. It was like I was into it.
What matters is emotional stakes, man. They're high in both. 100%. They're high with the Chiefs. They're high with Ethan's playing baseball. It makes it the same thing.
Yeah,
you know?
that's. I got the same feeling. I got back home and we put the kids right to bed. It was late. The game didn't even start till 7, and then it went long. We basically forced another inning by getting them out quickly. It runs on a clock. It's not by inning, but obviously you have to have the same number of innings unless there's a run rule situation. So, it was late, but I put them to bed, walked back out, and I was like, I need to wind down for a little bit. I'm fired up.
Adrenaline. That's awesome. When you were texting me, you were saying that some unlikely people on the team had poked some singles out there and gotten on base.
Just the kids who've struggled to even make contact all year, just, never swung a bat before. The coaches do that what they can. But anyway, the last 3 guys were going to be the last chance, the bottom 3 guys in the order who've maybe gotten a couple hits all year. And one of them scratched out a single and then ran the bases well enough while the other kids were loading them up. So he made it over to third. And it was crazy because he kind of fell onto third to get there, like right under the tag, basically, because he was not coordinated to dive or slide. Yeah. So it was just kind of a stop, fall on kind of thing.
Yeah. Wow.
I was like,
I didn't know there was base path drama as well, man.
Dang, and there's always base path drama with these kids. They're not. It's just.
I'm sure I just been more like you had to beat the tag kind of thing.
Yeah, it was close.
Yeah, 7's a little young to maybe be diving in head first, or they're definitely.
Well, there's some kids that are just they understand what's going on. His was just more of a I know I'm supposed to go touch that base and. Wasn't super coordinated the movement that he made, but it works. So staying alive, baby.
It made me think when we were growing up, you're playing in your yard or the driveway or whatever, depending on the sport. Oh, last few seconds, Jordan has the ball, hits the shot, or it's the bottom of the ninth, always. 2 outs. Yeah,
2 outs, bases loaded.
I wonder if this person has ever thought that. Now, like they quite literally did it at 7. Yeah, that's great. That's big time. I still remember some dramatic plays I made at that age in baseball. So he'll probably remember that most of his life.
I bet they'll all remember this one for a minute. It was tense because we were basically the season was over going home.
Yeah, that's true. It wasn't even just like a crazy win in the regular season. It was semis. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It was a good time.
So today we're talking about occupancy numbers. We're going to talk about it broadly, but. Considering it at a single
a property,
absolutely, yes. Matthias, why don't you frame it out for us? Why this is the conversation that is both interesting and could be helpful for those who are looking to invest or have already invested.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about like occupancy percentages and then kind of some of the inputs for occupancy. The leases in general, like new leases or renewal leases for existing tenants, and kind of some like as we're going to talk kind of in the frame of our typical business plan, the value add business plan, where the part of the business plan is almost always to raise rents. And we'll talk about how that all plays into it and And, we were talking beforehand, you'd think, okay, 100% occupancy, that's great. That's perfect, right? Well, they're not necessarily. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. So we're basically just going to talk about kind of all the pros and cons of existing tenants versus new tenants, new leases, and so on. And then kind of how they all play together, and then what we're going for, what we're striving for, what a perfect, quasi perfect picture looks like. Really, that's kind of what we're discussing today, and that's the context, if it makes sense.
Right, because one of the contexts is that we have had actual, conversations with investors who, and it's not an unreasonable question by any means, but one like, oh boy, the occupancy is 93 or 91. Are we really worried about that? And there's maybe we're not worried about it. Maybe it's something we're working on, but at the same time, there's like a whole other concept of why it might be right in line with what we're trying to do with the property at that moment to have it high 80s, low 90s. Sure. So yeah, it's kind of this whole discussion is kind of born out of that conversation because you would think naturally 100%, right? It's what you want all the time. Not necessarily, which is kind of a strange, until you get into it, it's a strange thing to wrap your head around. Like, oh, you want empty units?
Yeah,
but exactly. It's a matter of time, really, more than in a lot of ways. So let's jump in.
Yeah, so I figured we'd start with renewals and talk about kind of the pros and cons, why we like them, what the challenges are with them, and so on. The highlight of renewals and why they're great is that it's one, there's no turnover cost. There's no vacancy time. There's no, hey, we have to clean the carpet or replace the flooring or paint the walls, whatever, the make ready costs per se for turning a unit for when turnover happens. So that's the number one, right? The number one reason we like is because there is no turnover cost and there's no vacancy cost. Let me just say, one, we use renewals, we incentivize renewals for good tenants, tenants that pay on time, that take care of their unit, that get along well with the neighbors. These are all things that go into the calculus when we're offering renewals. Most of the time, the property managers will go, like, it's assumed that they're going to offer renewals to everyone. But by exception, they may go, we may have a discussion about a particular tenant who's been late 11 out of the 12 months they've been in the property or whatever. Or potentially that, hey, this person, the kid or the boyfriend of the tenant is there a lot and he makes a ruckus or what have you. We'll have a discussion about particular tenants, like, hey, do we want to offer them a renewal? Because obviously we're trying to improve the overall quality of life for everybody, all the tenants on the property. And if there's a problem, tenant or their dog or what have you, we may decline to offer renewal and just say, hey, we're not going to renew your lease and have them move out at the end of their lease. So one of the things with renewals, that's what I wanted to say, is that, hey, if they're a good tenant, we'll offer them renewals. But that brings us to kind of one of the limitations of renewals is that oftentimes our business plan is to, like we talked about, raise rents, right? So if I'm just going to throw out some numbers, if we're at $800 a month on rents and we want to get to $1,100 a month, $300, like whatever that is percentage wise of increase to get directly to the target market. We've identified that our target market rents are this 1,100. We don't necessarily want to put the tenant all the way to 1,100. So what that could do is slow down your business plan a little bit. If you offer everybody renewals and you only offer them at maybe we take it to 950 instead of all the way to 11. We take it halfway to where we want to be, or maybe we only raise it $100 a month, or whatever strategy we've identified. It can induce some lag time in the business plan and achieving our whole property at target market rents, which we'll come back to later when we talk about occupancy numbers and so on. But does that make sense?
Right. So far? Yeah, of course. You're saying first, even if it is by market assessment, 1,100 is what this type of unit is going for.
Right.
It's a bit much just as
far as it's going to be some sticker shock. Yeah.
Human relations point. And also if it's a good tenant to be like, we're raising your rent 38%.
There you go.
That's whoa. That is a lot. Yeah, exactly. So
a lot of them will move out if you tried to do that. They would be like, no, we're not staying here. Even if they would end up paying, maybe they move to a place that market rates are 1,100 for similar units. So maybe they go pay 11 somewhere else, but they're like, hey, I'm not paying $300 more for the exact same unit I had the month before for 800, or whatever. In their mind, that's how that works.
Right. That's one of those situations where the belies the concept of the rational consumer, right? Which, but in the same time, you kind of understand it too.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why we rarely do that.
Yeah. But
We
if
might
you do it other way, of course, it means it's going to take you 2 to 3 years to get to that rate. But I think one thing that should be said is that oftentimes, even if a unit has been moved out of, you renovated, it's nicer than the others now because it's in that phase of the business plan, it still might not be raised all the way to 11 immediately, because even then you move somebody in at 11 and they're like, wait, these people are making it's 8 over here, so it's gradual either way. But moving an existing person, would it be accurate? Actually, this I don't know, but statistically, moving an existing person to market rates is almost always, on the whole, slower than bringing people in to market rates.
Yeah, and that's a great question, because it's going to, honestly, it's going to play into all the stuff we're talking about today, is because you stay occupied if you do it that way, move existing tenants all the way to market. You stay occupied. Your cash flow is more, I would say, even per se. It's an even gradual increase. But yeah, you do lose out on the opportunities. So I guess to talk a little bit about renewals versus new leases in general, is that where we at in the business cycle, in the business plan. So if the property has a good reputation, you've fixed a lot of the deferred like for instance, there was visible issues on the property when you buy it, you've fixed those things, you've improved the units, perhaps whatever you've done as part of your business plan, you before you do those things, or while you're still doing those things, you probably wouldn't want to go straight to market rents on your vacancies, right? So if you have something to show for it, and you've improved the property, and you have the units and the general property and tenant quality and everything up to a point where, hey, we could say this is a rent comp to what the market is demanding in terms of that $1,100, let's say. Maybe while you're doing renovations, you put the rents at $1,000 or 1025, you make up some sort of in-between number to where you're raising them into a point where it won't be hard to raise them all the rest of the way in the future, once you've completed, the physical improvements and, gotten rid of any bad apples or what have you. And there's reputation is good, and the property's good. You might go to some intermediate, like I said, you'd go to intermediate and then go the rest of the way when you're done with all those things. So in a property where we are renovations complete, we fixed the outsides, everything looks pretty much where we want it to be, yes, we might go all the way to market rates. So at that point in the business cycle, I don't want to say a liability, but the existing tenant renewals can technically slow you down versus putting a new tenant in there fully at the market rate, I guess. But we have some techniques to offer incentives for the existing tenants to sign the full market rate. Maybe we'll offer, for the first 6 months, you get half off of the increase. Let's say in this 8 to 1,100 scenario, you go, hey, you paid $950 for the first 6 months, and then the final 6 months, your credits are gone, and now you're back at the full rate. That's still pretty steep for that scenario, but we use half off of the increase for the first 6 months of your lease. We've definitely used that when working existing tenants up to the market rates, usually when it's not that big of a chunk, but something along those lines.
Yeah. I feel like your example is a bigger jump than what we're normally doing, but it illustrates it fine. I would think that also the discount thing, I guess that's not really the word we use. It's not discount, but those kind
incentives, just some signing sort of incentives.
Yeah. Those are definitely effective in tandem with renovations, right? If you can
exactly,
it's an existing person, maybe you're moving them to a new unit, or somehow you manage to do their unit while they're still in it. Either way, if you physically improve the unit, then that's kind of a good point. Increase.
If it's exactly the same unit and nothing has changed, it's a lot harder to get them to pay really any increases. But if it can be done, because if there was no pool, or the pool was a pond. So basically, if we've accomplished most of, or at least a solid chunk of our business plan in terms of what we're physically doing at the property, what we're doing operationally at the property, and what we're doing, maybe on the interiors of the units or what have you. It's a lot easier to convince existing tenants to pay a higher rent to get closer to market rates at that point versus just trying to ask them to get up there with only, with minimal changes to what they've been experiencing. So that's one of the, but it is just by fact, it is slower to get units out. Like if you were completely vacant, had a completely vacant property, you could put everybody within a year, right? Everybody you leased up, you just boom, you'd be at market rents, theoretically in a year. Obviously, you wouldn't do that, but I'm just saying that, that's where perhaps some vacancy allows you to execute a little bit quicker certain parts of the plan.
Right. Because not only are you bringing in people, who are coming into the new situation, especially if that new situation includes physical improvements and operational improvements, but you also have those units available to quickly renovate.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point because we have experience doing it, but you can do some renovations with tenants in the units. You don't need them to be vacant in order to do some certain types of renovations. But for things like flooring and painting, you can't really do that with a tenant in there because literally you have to get all their stuff off the floor or away from the walls. And you know what I mean? Like, so it's not really something that's feasible. So if part of your business plan involves redoing the floors, then existing tenants, you basically have to, in that scenario, you basically have to get tenants to move across the property if you want to keep the same tenants. Otherwise, you need the vacancies in order to conduct your business plan in any manner of time other than every 3 years somebody moves on from the property. That's a real slow business plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to reiterate one thing. Like you said, it depends on where in the business plan you are, but it's also in that vein. If you're like month one, I'm just kind of expanding on what you were saying. You're like, okay, tenant, you're renewing. Well, here's the new rates. We haven't really done anything to the property yet because it's early.
Yeah.
And they're like looking around like, what, why is it? How is it?
Something to do. Yeah.
What do you mean it's going up this much? You guys are improving, so, but then if their lease comes up in like month 10,
there's theoretically could be a whole lot done. Could be a brand new property.
Yeah. Not only the exterior things have been, improved operationally, probably with the exterior itself, just landscaping, all those kind of things. Maybe they probably got neighbors who have maybe moved into a newly renovated place. This is something that they know that they're going to get eventually. There's all these things. They can see the momentum, and then it's a whole different conversation about raising it one way or the other. And that would also, if you think that through, if depending on the scenario, whether it's, we need to renovate and people can't be in there, or, obviously we're trying to do as much of this as possible at the front end, occupancy dips can indicate different phases of that execution of the plan, right? So if, for instance, for some reason you have 3 or 4 or 5, I don't know. I don't even know we haven't even said how big this unit is, but say 1 month, just nobody renews. And then, the next month the investor gets the report and the occupancy is almost exactly the same as that. Like after all that dip, they're like, what's going on? It's like, well, we took this opportunity to renovate all of those units.
Yeah.
And then in the time it took to renovate them and now get them ready and get them back on the market and then get people in them, there's a lead time there where it could cover multiple reports. So that, oh my gosh, it's 88% for 2 months could be misleading, I guess. Just as an example.
And there's nothing wrong with intentionally inducing vacancy on your property. Whereas, there's always going to be a natural turnover, right? You're never going to have 100% occupancy all the time. Somebody got a job and is leaving town. Somebody got married, whatever, all the life things that would cause you to move out of an apartment. You're having a kid, you need to go to a bigger spot. You're buying a house, who knows, whatever it is. Boosting vacancy means, hey, you're selecting people. If there's some tenants who've been a little bit of a bad apple in one way or another, you could potentially say, hey, you could stay, but we're going to take you all the way to market. And that way you're getting you're kind of getting 2 birds. Either way, it's a win for you, really. It's like, hey, if they come up to market, okay, well, then, we're already getting market rates on their unit, provided they're not a danger or they're damaging your unit, stuff like that. You would just get rid of them. You wouldn't offer them. But if they're like, hey, we pay late sometimes, but they eventually catch up, or
Yeah.
whatever. There's something that's not ideal, but it's not like dangerous.
Right. They're a little loud
Then
at times, annoy some neighbors, but
yeah, sure. Not something that's going to be like a real problem to the property, just kind of an annoyance. Then potentially you say, hey, well, we'll offer you to stay, but it's going to be at full market rates. And then, so you could induce vacancy by doing that, by intentionally not renewing people, or by just not marketing the units as they come to. If you were going to, let's say you're doing a full gut job renovation on the unit, you need to have a down unit or multiple. It's cost effective to do more than one at once.
Right. Yeah.
Anytime you do it, right? So let's say it's a 100 unit property, you do 10, 15 at a time. Yeah. Okay. You're at 85% occupancy. You have 15 vacant units, but hey, in the long run, you're saving a lot on the renovation costs, because you have one contractor with his team go through and do all of them at once. And boom, let's say it took 4 months to do 15 units or something. Hopefully not that long, but whatever. Now you've got all those are going to be tippy top, perfect condition, market rate rents, and you've got a good chunk of your 100 unit property all at once that goes, versus the one at a time. Your costs are higher per unit, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good moment and illustration of how, like everything else that we've talked about here on this podcast, one number doesn't tell a whole story, right? By any means.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, you could have 100 or 98% occupancy or whatever, but the rents aren't coming up at the same rate because everyone's still in the unit. So the cash flow isn't increasing. You're spending more per renovation because it's one-offs. So that's hurting cash flow.
There's also
on and on. The 98% looks great, but it doesn't necessarily mean the business plan is stronger or is being executed better.
For instance, when we're buying a property and we see really high occupancy rates, but we know the market, so we know where rents generally should be, and if they're below that really high occupancy, you're going to see that, because that means people don't want to leave. People aren't going to leave their $800 a month unit if they know the market is the market, right? So the market rates are $1,100. They go, I'll stay put in here, and they sign lease after renewal. Well, we know when we see that, when we buy a property or getting ready to take over property, that tells us that there's a good chunk of the maybe 20, 30% of those units are going to be lived in for like 5 to 7 years or longer. Which means that they're going to be in rough shape. Anybody who lives in an apartment for 5 to 7 years, you can almost guarantee a full paint job almost every time, a full refloor, unless it was tile or something to begin with. So that's an example of a scenario where high occupancy rates, stable 100% occupancy, isn't necessarily a good thing for the condition of the property. You really do want to freshen up units at the latest every 3 to 4 years, really, maybe 4 to 5 years, we'll call it. But the problem is you're taking over below market rate rents, and then just the lower the cost of the unit, the less likely that tenant is going to take super good care of it. It's just the way it works. If it's a class A luxury apartment, they're almost always spick and span and super clean and in great shape, right? But as you come down the income scale, it's just a statistical fact. They don't clean as well. They have more and more things that will damage the floor, damage the walls, whatever. That's just the way it is. So those high occupancy rates it's good for the income levels. Like, hey, you need stable income in order to convince a lender to lend on it, but you do know that you know what you're buying. And so just the same as if it's a property we've owned for a long time and we're at 100% for a year, some of those units are going to be in bad shape. It's just the way it is. Somebody has been there for longer than what you would kind of want in a refresh period.
Yeah, that the fact that barring any behavior one way or the other, just take an average, people living their lives in one form or another,
wear and tear.
Every year that's going to add to the amount that it's going to cost to turn it over. You can think about that as a per year cost. Yeah. I was going to do this earlier, but we went a different direction. But now that you brought it up, that kind of bigger context, just to pull back a little bit, occupancy numbers and percentages is a big deal. Obviously, it's something that is going to be one of the first things that is on any kind of report in this investment scenario, because like you said, you just went all the way back to the beginning. Like the occupancy will determine what kind of loan you can get to purchase the place, right? And then it's going to determine the type of investor interest. It's going to determine the runway of the business plan, depending on what you're buying, right? And then it's going to be indicative of where in the business plan you are. And then the next step is, and that's a part and parcel, you send out a quarterly report or you send out a monthly report. Here's where the occupancy level is, snapshot in time. It can be very much an indication of something going well or good, or it could just be well, or I guess well or bad, or it could just be a phase right now because of what's
going on at the property.
Now, if you're in investment year 5 in a property, and then all of a sudden you take like a 20% dip, if you get that report, investor, you might want to be like calling somebody, be like, what is happening?
Yeah. That's a bit late to be inducing that much vacancy. You should have known you should have expected that if that was going to happen. And if it's not, I've never heard a business plan that included that. So give me a call and ask me what I think's going on. It's probably not good.
Yeah. But I guess just the last condition, you said this earlier, but just to be clear, we're coming at this as always from the value add business plan model that we execute, which means that the occupancy is going to be somewhere basically north of 80. And we're going to be doing multiple changes that require logistical negotiation to bring the property to where we want it to be, which is going to affect those numbers. Like you said, if it's a brand new building and you're just like leasing it out to people, it's going to be a completely different paradigm on how you read those numbers.
Yeah. And so this might be a good place to kind of talk a little bit about what we underwrite to in terms of occupancy rates. We underwrite to a 7%, so 93% occupancy is typically, or more, depending on if we know we're going to do heavy turns, we'll do more. We may make it a 10% vacancy or something. And even when we're done with our business plan, we leave it at a 7% occupancy, which helps us. That's just another way to make our numbers conservative. We basically buy in markets that average for our types of units, 93 to 95% occupancy. We operate significantly above that. We're typically at 97%, give or take, on our occupancy at any given time on properties. So that's just more margin that we build in, part of how we give ourselves safety, a little bit of safety margin. But notice, we have properties that are currently right now 100% occupied, but that was after they were at 96 for 30 days. 2 people moved in, or whatever it might be, like because we were doing something with those units, we were moving on for bad tenants, what have you. So there's always going to be some vacancy. I would argue that the ideal occupancy is somewhere between, it's probably at 97, 98, depending on the size of the property too. The smaller a property it is, one vacancy could give you 6%. If it's I'm trying to think, you know what I mean? Like it just depends. So all else being equal, let's say it's a 100-unit property, we're going to aim for 97, 98%. Ideally, it's a 2-week turnover, a 2-week period of time between one tenant moving out and the next moving in. That's almost perfectly ideal. Like somebody saw it was coming due, they applied, they got approved. As the person was moving out, now you're doing the turnover, make readies, you're cleaning the unit, doing whatever quick, maybe painting, whatever needs to be done in that turnover, and then they're moving in 2 weeks. And that's the most ideal situation imaginable. And as you could guess, that doesn't happen if it's in January when somebody moves out, because it's just not a perfect seasonal time for people to be moving. So we might be able to pull that off a couple times during the summer when the most people are moving and the most unit changing is going on and things like that. But it doesn't always work that way. So in order to have the normal turnover, you're going to have vacancy. You can't really stay unless you're doing something wrong. Well, that really just means your rents are too low. If you're 100% for an extended period of time, it's because you're not raising rents, which means people are being incentivized to stay in the units longer than they normally would.
Beyond
exactly
the range of normal incentives.
They're finding reasons, and the reasons is low rent to stay in the same unit.
Right.
And not move on with the normal life stuff that everybody else is doing.
Right. It sounds drastic, but it's technically a distortion in the market, right? So their behavior is being distorted. They would have normally maybe gone and found a different place or moved closer to where their new job is and stuff like that. But exactly. Just to circle back to percentages are fun, right? We all know that they can mean lots of different things. We definitely have a property where 2 people move out. That's a 5% hit immediately, right? So, you can go from like a strong.
That's the 40 unit. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's like,
it's
like
strong
boom.
96% or whatever, or I guess 97.5, and the next thing you know, you're like, oh my gosh, we're around the 90s.
92.5. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, we're not talking about 12 unit properties here. In those situations, you just have to elongate the aperture of snapshot. So it's over a 6-month period, we were at a 92% occupancy or whatever on our 12 unit property, right? Because you'd go from 88% to, or whatever the number would be, to 100%. So you just find the average. The smaller the property, the longer the time period you have to take into account.
Yeah. I mean, just think about your 8 unit that it would be, I mean, it's catastrophic. 2 people move out. That's 25%.
Yeah, we're in the 70s.
You're in the 70s immediately. Oh no. That you're talking about the ideal situation of turnover. Even that would take 2 weeks. You're talking, they're signing up for an apartment that probably something previous people haven't even necessarily moved out of
exactly.
yet.
Like you have the application in, they're ready to move in. Because nobody goes, I'm moving in. Very few people go, I'm moving in tomorrow. When they sign an application, they're like, hey, my lease isn't up till
this time
XYZ, and then I'll move to your property, or I'm not moving here until a few months from now. Especially military people, like you get permissive leave to go check out your new place if you're getting ready to PCS or to move in the military. They give you time to go house hunting. They basically call it house hunting leave. We'll go search ahead of time, but nobody goes, hey, I'm here. I live here tomorrow. My stuff's in the car. When can I move in? That would be quite rare.
Yeah. Well, that would be quite rare in general, but it would be outside of extraordinary circumstances. That would be indicative of a different type of property from what we're running. Just all their stuff is in a car and they're like, I can move in today.
It's like, oh boy.
Oh man. That timeline is complicated because of all the logistics of anyone ever moving. Right. And then of course the apartment operations part as well, which next thing you know, right. Like, especially if we talk about snapshots and people assessing it by month or quarter or whatever. But I think we've covered most of it here. I did want to just ask, we've mentioned new leases versus renewals and why, for instance, the new lease has its advantages, especially at the beginning of a business plan. I was wondering though, it's because those are 2 big numbers a lot of times, and I am framing this discussion by what you might see on a report, right? Are there scenarios later in the business plan where the new leases versus renewals could tell a different story, I suppose? Because we focus primarily on the first 2 years, essentially 3 years of bringing up a property to full operation or whatever you want to call it. But
I would say that, let's say transitioning from year 2, 3, we're still business plan is going, we're raising rents, we're in the stabilization process. But if you go till after stabilization, maybe years 4 or 5 of an investment, that's when you really want renewals. You've executed your plan for the most part, so you're just trying to cut down on turnover costs, excess turnover costs. There's no reason to, you don't want to paint a unit once a year. It may need it every time somebody moves out, so that's just an added cost. If you can keep that tenant in there for 3 years before they move, boom, you've cut the paint cost. So years 4 or 5, you want to see more renewals. You're not raising everybody's rent. You're just, maybe you're doing like the market's up 3% from where it was last year. So you're doing like real very modest rent raises. You're not getting them up to market. They're at market, and just market is climbing as you go. So it's a little bit easier to keep them. But I would say, let's say, on down the road, 6 through 8 years, 7, 8, maybe, because of what I talked about earlier, you do want to see an occasional turnover so that you can get these, because theoretically you're looking to sell soon, right? And if somebody walks in and every unit is well lived in, they know that there's going to be significant turnover costs. So you do want to start, just as a normal business, you want to start being able to have some fresh units. Somebody who's been there that entire, let's say, 7-year business plan, that unit's going to need some work. inevitably, right? It's going to show some wear and tear. So if you haven't done flooring or painted in there, it's going to look rough as uh, part of the sale process. Which, you're not gonna kick a great tenant out, but these are things that you do want to kind of start seeing. So I guess the answer is that occupancy levels, and whether you're strong in renewals and you're pulling everything together, it's the answer is it's a blend. Like it depends on where you're at in the cycle of the investment, and what you're trying to accomplish at that point in time is what you ideally. And obviously we've been talking like we get to control all these things. Sometimes market demand just, maybe they build 3 new apartment complexes in the same neighborhood, which means that your occupancy is going to go down and your rents may get hit. You may have to adjust in that. So obviously we aim not to do that. That would be a horror story. But I'm just saying things can happen outside of your control where it's not optimal. Hey, occupancy is dipped. We're in the mid 80s. We want to be low 90s or mid 90s. We're going to have to fight. We're going to have to figure out incentives to get people in. Maybe we offer a few months rent for free to get you to sign a year-long lease or what have you in order to get the occupancy up. But those things could be happening too, completely outside our control. So I guess that's kind of the other shoe to drop on this subject is, if everything's under our control, we may not want to be at 100%, but we'll rarely be there anyway if we're running it properly, because of what we've talked about, the normal life cycle and people living life. Yeah. But then there are things outside our control that happen too.
Yeah, it would almost be like an eerie situation to walk into if you're like, wait, you've been at 100% occupancy for how long? Are you letting people leave?
Exactly. Why are there so many bars on the doors? Yeah. And why are there bars on the doors in general?
Why does everyone look like really pale and scared all the time? What's happening?
Is everybody in striped pajamas? Yeah.
I think talking about the things beyond control, right? And also mentioning at the sale point, I think is a great way to bring this to an end, because you're talking about endpoints and also the end of the conversation as far as theory and philosophy of occupancies. If it's something that's outside your control, philosophy doesn't matter at that point. But it could even be something good in the area that causes it, right? I'm just thinking, what if they open a factory? You want a big factory to come into the area, but what if it's
workforce housing? Heck yeah,
I don't know, 30 minutes away, and then all of a sudden there's people like, oh, there's a place closer, and then some of them move over there. I mean, that's a fluctuation. It's not going to be drastic, but it would.
What numbers would do was eventually, like, that would cause demand to go up, because more people would show up, and so your rents would start climbing higher in that scenario. Whereas you might initially lose some as everybody races to go to the close apartments to the new business, the new whatever it might be. Yeah. The rest of us are going to be raised up eventually too. So good point.
Yeah, and I just keep thinking recently, since you brought this up, as far as like, oh, we might need to incentivize those kind of things. If it's moving around college towns as much as I did, I felt like you could always easily find good places that were giving incentives. And that's definitely not because there wasn't demand, but because of the nature of the market, people are often moving on and coming in, right? So that's another part is the market one where it just naturally has
high turnover. Yeah.
If you're in a college town like Hattiesburg, there probably is going to be a higher turnover than maybe somewhere else. But just to wrap it up here, moving to the sale, I think that was a great point about how you have almost the same incentive as you do in the beginning, but just for a different result, right? You want to be able to get in there and improve things, but not so much that your occupancy levels dip too much.
Exactly. It's a tug of war, man. It's a tightrope that you gotta walk.
And I had never thought about, I don't think we've ever discussed this, when you're walking a property, that if you go into units that they're all well lived, you're like, oh gosh, that's so much that we're going to have to do at some point if we take it over, versus seeing the natural turnover. I never thought about that aspect of assessing a property. Like, oh wow, too many tenants have lived here too long. Would be well,
that just tells you how low your rents are. That's exactly what it tells you. It tells you that those rents are very low, and you're going to be able to increase rents, because that means these people never heard of another property like this,
right,
that they could rent for that amount. So yes, it's a good news, and yes, it's bad news.
Right.
Yes, it's going to take a lot more work, but yes, your assumptions are right. The rents are very low. You can improve the income. I would say that just as a quick note, I prefer to purchase a well lived in property where people have stayed longer. One, obviously because the rents are lower, but two, that means that there wasn't something else on the property driving them away.
Right.
Because oftentimes problem properties will have high turnover because there's drug deals going on in the parking lot, or there's a guy who gets in fights and throws stuff at people, that kind of thing. So high turnover and low rents can be some opportunity. You could fix those problems, but that means there are other problems. So I like to buy properties that are just low rents, and I'll deal with very well lived in properties and losing some tenants as we raise rents up the market, because it's just easier to fix versus having to change the reputation of a property where it's a little bit dangerous, because that's when you see really high turnover and low rents.
Yeah, or management is terrible and they will never fix anything. So you're going to have to fight against that. Even though you can replace that quickly, doesn't mean that, like we've talked about before, it's not like it goes out on a bulletin to everyone in the area.
Oh, hey, new management over here to everybody in town.
Just they get a text alert. Like
it takes a minute. Everybody's iPhone goes off.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. Hopefully this shed some light on the considerations about not only just actually when looking at a property to buy about occupancy, and when running it about occupancy, but also as someone who might be investing and is looking at those numbers, all the different angles. We hope that this helped elucidate and illuminate some of those particulars. As always, we appreciate you hanging out with us, and we'd love to hear from you in any of the ways that you can get in contact with us. Comment on any of the platforms that this is on. Send us a DM on LinkedIn. Email us at capitalvelocityinvestments.com. Also go to the website. We'd love to hear from you. But for now, we're going to say see you later, and hope that you'll come back and hang out with us again next week on another edition of the Get Invested podcast.
See ya.